Street level in Toronto. The story today is snow underfoot and a police search in the East End, while the bigger picture runs through Washington, where the U.S. Supreme Court just reshaped how far a president can go on tariffs. Later in the brief, I'll bring it back home to what Canada can and can't count on next in cross-border trade. Toronto starts the day under steady cloud and snow on the ground. Expect a high around 2 degrees Celsius and a low near zero, with snow in the mix. Police in Toronto are asking for help identifying a woman they say is wanted in a forcible confinement and theft case. Investigators allege a man was pushed into a vehicle near Victoria Park in St. Clair, driven to a nearby lot, robbed, and then had his financial cards used. Police have released an image and are asking anyone with information to contact them or Crime Stoppers. And another Toronto policing story is developing in parallel. Newly released court documents tied to York Regional Police's Project South corruption probe include allegations that some officers helped place a GPS tracker on a person's vehicle, and that a separate scheme involved arranging a vehicle theft to support a false insurance claim. These are allegations in court filings. None of it has been proven in court, and the case is already drawing sharper scrutiny because multiple Toronto officers have been charged in the broader investigation. In sports, the Olympic men's hockey tournament is now set for a Canada-US gold medal final on Sunday morning. Canada needed a late power play winner to get there, Nathan MacKinnon scoring with under a minute left after an offside review upheld the goal. The big question heading into the final, whether Sidney Crosby, dealing with a lower body injury, is available. For Leafs fans, there's also a familiar name in the Olympic mix. Mitch Marner's overtime winner earlier in the run sparked reactions back in Toronto. Turning now to the main thread, the tariff ruling in the United States and why it matters so directly to Canada. The U.S. Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, struck down President Trump's broad emergency import tariffs that had been imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, often shortened to IEEPA. The majority, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, said those tariffs function like a tax on domestic importers, and that taxing power sits with Congress unless it's clearly delegated. Here's the key point. The court did not say the president can't use tariffs. It said this specific emergency law doesn't give the White House authority to set tariff rates in the broad way it tried to. Why it matters now is what comes next. President Trump responded by promising to pursue a new 10% global tariff using other statutes. He cited the 1974 Trade Act and signaled he could also lean on Commerce Department investigations for more targeted duties. Details were still unclear today, including which countries would be covered and whether previous exemptions would carry over. From a Canada and Toronto perspective, that uncertainty is the whole issue. Trade that's compliant with CUSMA, also known as USMCA, has typically been treated differently, and much of it enters duty-free in practice. But several major tariffs that matter to Ontario's manufacturing base can still remain because they're imposed under different legal tools, especially measures affecting autos, steel, aluminum, and some lumber products. Mid-episode reset, the ruling removes one set of tariffs, but it doesn't remove the trade fight. Markets took the decision calmly. U.S. stocks were modestly higher, moves under 1%. Suggesting investors expected the court might limit the emergency tariffs. But the mood is still cautious because U.S. growth has been soft, fourth quarter GDP around 1.4% annualized, while inflation remains stubborn enough to complicate the timing of interest rate cuts. In other words, tariffs aren't the only variable rattling forecasts. Canadian political leaders reacted with cautious optimism. Ontario's premier called it an important win, but emphasized that major sector tariffs still matter. Toronto's mayor underscored a separate point, that regardless of court outcomes, Toronto and Canada need to keep diversifying markets and supply chains so a single legal fight in Washington doesn't become an economic shock at home. The risk here is a shift, not an end. If the White House can't do broad emergency tariffs under IEEPA, the incentive is to move toward other authorities that can still produce significant and sometimes more targeted trade pain, by product, by sector, even by geography. Now the final piece to watch. First, timing. If a new 10% tariff is attempted under a different statute, it may come with built-in limits, possibly something like a roughly 150-day window, plus legal challenges that start a new clock. Second, scope. Watch whether exemptions for CUSMA-compliant goods survive, and whether targeted tariffs end up landing on the industries that matter most to Ontario, autos and metals especially. And third, volatility. Today's market reaction was muted, but the next round of policy design is where uncertainty usually returns. That's the Saturday brief. Snow in Toronto, an active police search, and new court file allegations in a major policing probe, and a U.S. court ruling that narrows one tariff pathway while leaving several others wide open.